So with that, I think we can probably move on to our next segment, right? Which is going to be the idea of a national divorce, right?
Huge fan.
Like I said, it was Timcast IRL. You're welcome. Cast Catchers, I guess is Cast Castle, which I guess it's still in the Timcast network. But those are the only three that I can remember off the top of my head that I mentioned explicitly the idea of a national divorce. Right.
Okay.
So it was multiple shows on multiple different networks. There was definitely another one that was separate from the Timcast network that mentioned this concept as well, right?
So let me ask you this then, because in particular,
Yes.
the verbiage national divorce it's used particularly by certain people in certain areas on certain shows, right? Michael Malice is a big one of it. He might have been one of the original coiners of it, if I remember.
He was
right.
talking to Dave Smith too, and that's
Dave
why
Smith, yeah. But as far as like media outlets, Timcast has been on this tilt for a minute. But I have seen the verbiage Civil War carry into other spaces that would not have even mentioned that a year ago. And we're talking a few mainstream outlets. Ben Shapiro has been talking about it now. Fucking Commentary Magazine has at least mentioned the concept.
You've had different
things like
journalistic, different newspapers write articles that we are in a civil war now, or this is a cold civil war. Like that's happening. There are articles being written to that effect. And I think the reason national divorce sits a little bit better with me, even if it might be a utopian idea, right?
Well, I think
national divorce leans to the idea that it could be an amicable separation that does not necessarily involve fighting, right? War, active warfare between two parties, whereas civil war is a civil war. People are dying, people are shooting guns, the bombs are going off, people are dying.
Yeah.
But the idea of a national divorce could indicate, like I said, even as utopian as that idea might be, especially in America, it could indicate an amicable separation, one that doesn't involve large-scale warfare, in which states, counties, parts of the country separate into two or more different nations.
And I like where you're going with this, because that's kind of my tilt on what's the difference between a civil war and a national divorce. National divorce is more societal.
Yeah.
Civil war is more governmental. Obviously, they're both societal.
Yes.
The national divorce doesn't require the government. The national divorce doesn't require government involvement. That can be done on a completely societal level with low to mild violence.
Yeah.
Not necessarily full-blown. Governments are taking stances against other governments. State governments are not taking stances against the national government.
Especially,
it could be, I mean, you could see it in both forms, but that's the way I think of the difference between the standard civil war and national divorces. National divorce is more societal. We agree that we cannot make this relationship work anymore.
Right.
You go do your thing, because we cannot. We have boiled the conversation down to the base foundational ethics and morals. We don't agree.
Right.
Our societal morals and our societal ethics do not align. They're contradictory to each other, so we cannot live together anymore.
Right.
You go hang out in California, we'll be over here.
And we've highlighted a few issues in the past where we've said something, posed questions very similar to that. Like abortion is one that's very consistent, and the idea of a centralized government versus one that's more focused on on individual liberties. We've talked about these concepts that become very large, and I know for certain I have asked and said I don't know how you parse that out. I don't know. And we always use abortion example because it's so pivotal, when you have one group that is considered something murder and another group that considers it a civil right. I don't know how you parse that out. I don't know how you resolve that issue if what one person considers murder you believe to be a civil right,
Yeah.
I don't know how you solve that. I don't, and that's not.
I don't think you can, if you asked me.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know, and so when you have one federal government that has laws that cover both of those parties, it seems like it is a near futile venture to create and pass a law in which both parties will feel fully satisfied with,
And there's something that's going to come up later when we talk about the gun laws that'll also kind of dovetail into this.
Thank you.
with the concept of state laws and
Gun
federal
laws is a
laws and
good
stuff
one.
like that coming in. But yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what you do about it, obviously, because it's distressing to a certain point. But I don't know. I'm kind of a fan myself of the concept of a national divorce. I don't think it's possible. Federal government wouldn't allow it to be possible. We'll put it that way.
Amicably, or you think at all?
I don't see a situation in which something we identify as a national divorce does not divulge into civil war. We'll just put it that way.
Well, and that's
Because the
national
tax
divorce doesn't necessarily preclude a civil war from it. You know, I think that, and that's why I was saying I think a national war just includes the possibility that there isn't, but it doesn't preclude the idea that, or exclude the idea that there could be one, but it opens the door to the idea that maybe there won't be, because it doesn't take. To your
I think
point
all
earlier,
you need to do is add the idea that nuclear weapons exist, and the idea of a totally amicable, peaceful divorce goes away.
And that's why I said earlier, it may very well be a utopian idea, you know, and that's one of the much more complicated issues, you know. Right. It can seem very simple when you first start to talk about it as first thing. Like, yeah, fuck it, you know, different states and commerce and blah, 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 blah. And as long as they figure out the trade, then what does it really matter, you know? But it's not
Everybody forgets those damn missiles.
It gets very complicated. So,
Now, who do you think in your...
Oh, I was going to say, sorry,
go
I
ahead.
got to interrupt real quick. So I was going to say, to your point earlier about the federal government's involvement, right? This doesn't even require the idea of secession, doesn't even require and excludes the executive branch. It's a decision of the states, right?
Yeah.
If 2/3 of the states, I believe it is, decide that X amount of states are going to leave, then they can go.
Yeah. The old 2/3.
Yeah, so it doesn't even require the federal government, you know, only the states at that point. So,
Yes, which I believe constitutionally is the only way at which it can be okay.
right.
Because the federal government only exists because the states decide to give it power.
Right.
So if the states have a thing going on, the federal government can go fuck itself and wait in the corner. Abraham Lincoln, I'm sorry. It's not going to work out this time. That's an interesting thing.
Yes.
That is an interesting thing because it would be just as bad today. It would be just as unconstitutional today. But there's not exactly slavery to be fighting for.
No,
right?
I think
Which was something that really helped, I think, the populace be okay with something like that. You know, you had a social issue there that people can get behind and say, no, this is bad, this is wrong, we're going to stop this. What, other than, like, I don't know, maybe authoritarianism nowadays, could you find something else that you could convince the populace that would be able to back something like a war like that? Like, I don't know if I could.
I don't know about a singular issue. You know,
Right.
I think that you would probably an amalgamation of issues that you put under the umbrella of something like civil rights, you know, and that's what I was talking earlier about. Like, if you're considering like abortion's a civil right, and
what we define as a civil right.
if you're considering healthcare a civil right, you know, and like things like that, that all of these are now encompassed, and like these are civil rights, and if they're not included in this, then we don't have a civil country, and we don't whatever. You know, there's going to be a whole slew of people that maybe even are supporters of those things, of Medicare for all and of abortion, that don't think that they're civil rights and don't think they need to be added to the Bill of Rights, you know, as an amendment.
Well, and that I was just going to say, do you think that's something that maybe speaks to the lack of like belief truly behind these unconstitutional? I don't know what you call it, programs. Like the universal health care, like the concept of universal health care is unconstitutional essentially. But you could easily go for an amendment to change that to allow it to be. Kind of like the, God, I don't know why I'm drawing all these blanks right now, but somebody proposes something that is so foundationally different, it would require a constitutional amendment. But nobody pushing that kind of legislation is talking about trying to get a constitutional amendment. whether it be like filibuster reform, whether it be voting rights reform, whether it be universal health care, whatever you're going to change, whatever you're going to redefine as a civil right, something you want to ensconce as a human right. Bernie's not Australian. That was weird. But yeah, Bernie's always talking about this is a human right. Healthcare should be a human right. I don't see Bernie advocating an amendment to the Constitution to state that thusly.
I think that's because you run into the same barrier that you do with secession. It requires 2/3 ratification, and you're not going to get 2/3 of the states on board with saying that abortion is a civil right.
If you truly believe that, though,
that forces. I understand that they truly believe that.
If they
but
do.
Even if you do, if you know for a fact, you have to get 2/3 of the states. That's not like we can maybe convince some Republican senators.
Yeah,
you have to convince the state legislatures of Republican states like Texas, who just passed a 6-week abortion ban.
Yep.
You're not going to convince Texas to vote in favor of making abortion an amendment, of making that. So
I guess my point being,
for a fact that it's never going to happen. There's no point in proposing it.
I would say this, though. If you are, I guess my point being, I don't disagree with you at all, obviously, because there's the reality of the game, right? If you're an elected politician, you're not going to try to get something on the House floor that's going to die an abysmal failure right off the jump because nobody else is going to be on board because you can't even convince your local federal representation that this is a good idea. You need to go back to your states and push this shit at the state houses. You don't believe it enough. I guess I want to backtrack. My point being, if Bernie Sanders doesn't believe, even if he believes he can't get it done, he's an elected official put there to represent the viewpoints of his state. He should die on that hill and push for it every single day.
If that's what they want. You
illustrating the reason they don't want it.
Wait. Because you just contradicted yourself.
Did I?
You're saying that Bernie believes that if Bernie believes, we're using him as an example and a made-up thing, right?
Yeah.
If Bernie believes that abortion needs to be an amendment, that it's a civil right, right? So that's what he believes. You are then saying he's there to represent his constituents. If his constituents do not want that to be an amendment, then if he were to propose it to be an amendment, he's then acting on behalf of himself and not his constituents.
It shouldn't be a thing. So if his constituency, his state is pushing for that, right? He's there to do that job. He's pushing for it as a senator or even as a representative, whatever. Either way, you're pushing for that, even if you know it's not possible to get the votes for it. If your constituents believe that and you're there to represent them, you should die on the hill of fighting for that every single day. But none of these people do.
I think it's too reductionist. I think because if you think about
is that too utopian?
If you think about if you're Bernie Sanders, right?
Yeah.
You then face the decision of legitimately, right, to the same point of reduction that you're presenting it. I then have the choice to tell my constituents, listen, I can work on something that's happening right now, or I continue to hammer that this needs to be an amendment, and that's what my issue can be. Or I can address these other things that we might actually get done. What do you think they're going to want?
And which is ultimately how they abolish slavery, was choosing to say, I can't get the votes for this. I can't get the votes for this. Going at it at a different tack to get something that you may not necessarily, you may have advocated for 20 years at the bottom of your soul, but never tried to get it passed in a way or whatever until the timing is right, until the angle is right, until you can find a way to get a small W instead of a full capital W.
Well, and I think to your point earlier, there isn't anything to the same level as slavery that enough people are in agreement on. I think obviously the vast majority of people agreed that black people were the same as white people.
So,
or that they at least shouldn't be slaves.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So to prevent us from going too far afield here, because I realize how far off into right
You're
field
really
we
good
are,
at
right?
that.
I am. When it comes to the concept of a national divorce, the 2/3 majority issue is a problem because you're not going to let people leave the union without 2/3 majority. You're not going to allow a change like that.
And my counter to that would be, I think you could convince 2/3 of the states for different reasons that a national divorce is the right thing to do.
But not the one.
No, not
And
one.
that's
for
where we
different
were.
reasons.
Yeah.
If you present the idea of a national divorce and you look at the Democrats at one group and you say for this reason for abortion, and then look at part of the Republicans and you say for the reason of gun rights, and then look at these people and say for the reason of voting rights, and you look at these people and say for the reason of this. They're all, you could convince them all to be in favor of a national divorce for a different reason, but they're all going to vote for it.
Yeah. So
you know,
during the Lincoln times, you had something like slavery.
right?
Here, our problems are so many and so different that you're never going to be able to get 2/3 majority to actually to do that on a single issue.
Correct. Yeah, for a singular issue. And I think that, and this is again to your point, because of that, it is near impossible to have an amicable divorce, because the clear line that existed between North and South then will be this corner, this part in the middle, this part up here, and then also it stretches over to the Pacific Northwest. So somehow the West Coast and the East Coast are all one country, but you have all this shit in the middle that's maybe one or two other places. And so
I will say,
the fighting is going to happen when they're drawing those lines out, because people who live in a state are not going to be told by someone on the West Coast, oh, also you belong to us now. They're going to say, oh, you can suck my dick. No, I don't. I belong to this state that actually is going to represent my views instead of you pieces of shit.
Yep.
So,
welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat.